Hello, welcome back to Quilts Bloom at Dawn. I cannot believe Thanksgiving is just around the corner and we still have some finishing touches to do on a couple of our projects. So the goal today will be to finish up our Bountiful Basket. So we had already made our baskets. So today we're actually making the star block. This is made up of almost all half square triangles. So if you've been using your triangles on a roll paper and you already have your half square triangles made, this is just a matter of putting it together. But we'll take a look at this and break it down and do this one together today. In addition to that, once we finish up these blocks, if you notice on the pattern, and I'll go ahead and pop it up so we can take a look, you'll notice that amongst the sashing, there's actually some square and a square. So there's a total of 16 of these that connects the sashing pieces in between each row of blocks. In addition to that, there's a little bit larger square and a square that connects to the inner border. There's 4 of those. I'm going to demonstrate today using the square and a square paper from It's a Wema. The pattern actually demonstrates making it without that. So if you prefer to go ahead and make it the method you typically would, which is to fold those corners, go ahead and make it that way. I just decided, since I'm sort of on this roll of playing around with this foundation paper, I decided to go ahead and try my hand at this, and I did purchase both of these little pads. And what's great about them is you're only going to use a few of them, and then you'll have plenty left over. If you like it, you can continue to use it. And I'm just adding it to my basket with all my triangles on a roll and my flying geese foundation paper. I'm just adding that to my basket. So I have lots of it on hand. So whenever I'm doing a project, I can just grab it. Chances are I'll have the sizes that I need if I just keep accumulating this way. Each of these pads actually have enough paper to make a total of 42. But we're only doing a total of 16 of this size and only 4 of the larger ones. So we'll have plenty of leftovers. I'll be demonstrating this a little bit later on, as well as those star blocks. And then next week, the goal is we will put this together. We'll have everything made, ready to assemble, and then we'll be taking a look at it on the design board. And I have been busy. I know last week I mentioned how many quilts I had to quilt. Well, I have to tell you, I have been so busy quilting. And I do have one of those quilts on display here, and that is you doing the swirls. I did this entire quilt. This is the pumpkin picking pattern. I did the entire thing using swirls. We'll take a closer look at that quilt at the end of the video. But that's not the only one. I have so many to show you. I don't know that I'm going to have time to show them all today, but stay tuned. If you don't see them today, I'll be showing them over the next couple weeks. I might just spend one video where I do nothing but do a trunk show of all these quilts that we've been working on. But for now, I want to focus on finishing out all of our projects before Thanksgiving. Before we get started making our star block, I wanted to just share a couple thoughts with you. One of the things that I have heard now multiple times from different quilters is how intimidated they are to try new things, to try different things in quilting, to the point where they're almost paralyzed with fear of failure, and that prevents them from even trying. And I used that opportunity to encourage them, and I thought if they needed that encouragement, there's probably someone out there that needs to hear this too. So for all of you quilters that are sitting there watching some of these things and you think it looks really neat, but you're not sure if you could do it, you can do it. Are you going to be an expert at it overnight? No, but no one is. We all have beginnings. We all have to learn the process. And I encourage you, don't let the fear of failure stop you. Remember, quilting is truly a journey. It's where you are now. If I look at my earlier work and I see where I was then and compare it to where I am now, those early quilts are really rough. My binding is horrendous. My quilting, oh my goodness, no good, not at all. But you know what? It's where I was then. And I'm not ashamed of it. I do proudly put it out because it is part of my quilting story. I can look at that and say, yep, that was where I began. Now, this is where I'm at today. Because we're always improving. That's our goal, right? But Don't compare yourself to another quilter, and don't look at your work and say, not doing it the way it's supposed to be. It is what you make it. So embrace where you are today. Don't be afraid to challenge yourself and try something new, because chances are you're probably going to be great at it. Whether that be branching out to something like using foundation paper, maybe even doing some applique. I've been dabbling in just a little bit of applique. Now, I'll be honest, it's not really my thing, but it's not my thing today. And the one thing I've learned, never say never. I said I'd never quilt. Well, look at me now. I'm definitely quilting today. Be open-minded to trying new things. You might just love it. Well, that's the end of my encouraging moment for the day. Let's make our star blocks for our Bountiful basket pattern. All right, we are finally ready to go ahead and make our star blocks. So we'll make a total of 12 of these. And if you notice, this is primarily made up of nothing but half square triangles. The only additional fabric in this is the 4 squares to finish out our stars, and then the 4 sashings. Everything else in this block is a half square triangle. So everything I just mentioned, here's all the pieces. If you go based on the pattern, she's gonna have you actually do 2 half square triangles at a time. That is how I had been making mine up until I finally decided to go ahead and use It's So Emma's triangles on a roll. And oh my goodness, it is such a game changer. I highly, highly recommend using the triangles on a roll. One of the main advantages is the fact that literally you cut 2 large squares like this. These are 6.5 inch squares. Just pin them on the back of this, right sides together, and then start sewing. And you sew on the dashed lines. It's literally that simple. And when you finish, trim it down on the darkened lines, and you end up with 8 half square triangles. It is really that easy. I ended up making all of the blocks that I needed, all the half square triangles that I needed for this entire quilt using the triangles on a roll. And I loved it so much, I've already bought another roll of this size. This seems to be one of the most popular sizes. It's the 2-inch finished, 2.5-inch unfinished. I'm gonna go ahead and set these aside because I've already made mine. Now, if you want to see a demonstration of the triangles on a roll, you're welcome to check out a couple videos ago. I did a demonstration of this. We're gonna go ahead and assume you've already made your half square triangles. As far as how many you need, if you're going for the look that I have here, which is basically the 2-tone, you could do a light blue, a dark blue. You could do whatever colors you want. But if you're going with that 2-toned look, you'll want to go ahead and make the half square triangles based on what I'm going to give you now. If you want to make it more scrappy though, go for it. But this is how I did mine. So I basically, in that center, it's made up of a total of 4 of the 2 colors that you're using. Then coming out from that center pinwheel, you have your background with color 1. In my case, that's blue, to make that look. And then coming out from the orange. So this is color 2 with the background, 4 of those. And then 4 additional half square triangles to make these little sashing corner pieces. I'm going to set these aside. This and this I'm setting aside because that's going to be what we'll use to make our sashing. Then these 4 background squares are what are going to go right here in these corners of our star. You'll need a total of 48 of the 2 color half square triangles, 48 of color 1 with the background, 48 of color 2 with the background. And that's just to make the center star for 12 blocks. You'll need a total of 48 more of the half square triangles to make the little corner sashing pieces. In all, that's almost 200 half square triangles. So basically you're going to need 6 of these sheets for the color 1 in the background, 6 for color 2 in the background, 6 for the 2 colors, and then 6 more sheets to make the sashing corner pieces. I'm going to assume that we've already done this, or I'm going to assume that you've already made your half square triangles using the method that she provides in the pattern. We're going to go ahead and lay out our star. So in the center, we're going to go ahead and make our pinwheel. There we go. Okay, then coming out from our pinwheel, we're going to go ahead and do our blue on blue, and you want it to make this shape as opposed to that shape. So if it's coming to a point like that, you know you've done it wrong, and I am notorious for getting it wrong before I get it right. And then we're going to do the same thing with the orange. All right, and finally, we're going to finish these out with our background squares. And there's our star. So we're going to go ahead and start chain piecing this, and we will have this put together in no time. So I'm going to go ahead and do these in rows. So row 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to go ahead and put these right sides together. And to help me know which side is getting sewn, I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in it. Just like this. Just helps me to stay on track with it. Right, so you do not have to pin it like this. It's just something that helps me stay on track. So I know when I'm doing this that I'm sewing this side of each of these. Otherwise, I might start sewing the wrong side. It can easily get turned around. I'm going to go ahead and get all of these sewn, the seam sewn just like this. After I do that, I'm going to go ahead and take these 2 sections the same way, sew these together. So when I finish, I'll basically have my 4 rows, and I'm going to go get those pressed. So 1 will be pressed up, row 2 down, row 3 up, row 4 down. And that way everything will nest nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and get all of these sewn in rows and pressed, and then we'll take a look. All right, I have everything sewn together in our rows. We are ready to go ahead and sew our rows together. So I will go ahead and put these right sides together, and because of the way I pressed it, it should nest nicely. I'll just get this poke a pin method, make sure it comes through where it should, all the way down. I'm going to do the same thing to this side. Before I come back, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing and put these 2 sections together, so the next time you see this block, it'll be completely sewn and pressed. All right, so our star is done. We are ready to go ahead and add our sashing and our little corner pieces. Okay, so to make this, we're going to do this basically in rows. Row 1 would be this top sashing. This is row 2, and this is row 3. And again, we want the orientation of our half square triangles. We want the color portion going in, looking towards the star. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get this sewn together, this sewn, and this sewn. Again, when you're doing this, putting right sides together, when you pin this, I'll go ahead and do one side. So when I pin this, I am going to be very careful, I don't want to sew my star points. So I can see there's my star point right there. That's where that seam comes together. So that's just reminding me when I'm sewing, I look at where my pin where the point where my pin is inserted. Okay, so, and I'm going to go ahead and actually pin this down on both sides. And I'm going to do this for all 3 pieces, all 3 rows. I'm going to go get this sewn down both sides and pressed, and then we'll take a look. Okay, we are almost done. We just have 2 more seams. And if you notice, when I pressed this going out and this going in, so that when I go ahead and pin this, it's going to nest nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and get this pinned. And just a reminder, as I'm doing this, and actually I'm going to turn it around this way, I always like to see my points if possible. So now when I'm lining this up, again, there's my point right there. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my pin in so I know where that is, just as a reminder for me. All right, and I'm going to do the same thing to this side. Okay, our star block is done. I did want to go ahead and show you how I would trim this down. So this is a 12.5-inch block, 12-inch finished. And if it's bigger than the size that I have, you can always just use your mat. But I go ahead and just lay it out on this, and let's see, I like to go ahead and use my diagonal line, make sure that kind of lines up. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just trim off anything that's in excess of that. And I'll flip this around and check this side. All right, so I think we're pretty close. Now that we finished making both our baskets and our stars, let's go ahead and turn our attention to making our square in a square. You can make it just like the pattern lists, or you can use It's Soema, their foundation paper. They have one for square in a square. If you are going to do that, you would need the 2-inch size and the 2.5-inch size. So I did go ahead and purchase both of these from Fat Quarter Shop to go ahead and make specifically for this pattern. So we'll go ahead and make one of each of these. Now you'll actually need a total of 16 of the 2-inch size, and that's what's used to run along this sashing. In addition, you'll need 4 of the 2.5-inch sides for the 4 corners. Now when it says 2.5-inch, that's the finished size. So it's actually, when we make it, it's going to be a 3-inch unfinished and then a 2.5-inch finished. And it says that right here on this. Same with this. It's going to make a finished 2-inch and unfinished 2.5-inch. And so I've gone on ahead and made some just to give you an idea. So you can see I've been busy making these. So these are the ones for the sashing. Now if you notice, whereas on her example, she's using a variety of colors, I like the uniformity of one. That's just my personal preference. So I went on ahead and made all of mine this darker blue. Using that foundation paper, you got your seam allowance allowed so you won't lose those points. So again, I'm just so impressed with the level of precision and accuracy that I can achieve when I use foundation paper. Not to say that you can't be just as precise with the traditional methods, but definitely this method is quick and easy to do and yields accurate results really every time. I also made the ones for the 4 corners, and I went with a lighter blue, but again, all the same. And so you only need 4 of these, but I'm going to go ahead and set all of this aside, and we'll go ahead and make one of the 2-inch and one of the 2.5-inch together. Before I get started, I want to go ahead and gather all the supplies that I'm going to need. So I have my paper. Here's one sheet that we'll use to make this block. Now within the directions, it actually gives you tips and cutting instructions. So I know exactly what I need to cut for this. So I've gone on ahead and cut my square for my center, as well as 2 larger squares that I now need to go ahead and cut on the diagonal. So I'll go ahead and do that. All right, so this is now cut on the diagonal. So to make this square and a square using this foundation paper, this is what I'll need as far as fabric. A total of 4 triangles that have been cut down from a square, 2 squares, and then again my square for the center. In addition to that, I have my add a quarter ruler. You don't have to use this, but it's just nice because it already gives you that 1/4 inch that you'll need to add for your seam allowances. And I love this side of it because it narrows and allows me, when I'm folding my paper, it allows me to use that to just kind of fold. So it's really handy. The other thing I have is a glue pen. And this is from Sew Line. However, you can also just use Elmer's washable glue sticks, whatever you prefer. The first thing we'll go ahead and do is to fold our paper. Just helps to have this step out of the way. And so again, if you notice, I'm just folding it on each of these fold lines. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to put a dot of fabric right here. And that's going to be centered just like this. So just want to make sure it's centered pretty good so I don't have any fabric. Again, it's a large enough square that it's not a problem, but I'm essentially trying to make sure I kind of center it on that. Okay. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to trim down right here. Now that I've got that on, I can trim it down to the actual size I'm going to need. And I can do this all the way around. Okay, the next step is to go ahead and where it says the number 2, that's where I'm going to put this. So it's going to be centered right there. And I'll put a little dot of glue so it'll stay right where I'm putting it. And I'll do the same thing on this side, which is the number 3 then. All right, I'm going to go take this to the machine and sew now directly on that number 2 and number 3 line. Now I'm going to start over here a little bit off the paper and go all the way a little bit past. All right, I did make sure that my stitch length, I set it at 1.8. And again, I'm gonna start with it a little bit off the edge. And we're ready to get started. Just directly on that line. Now, you want to be careful that you're folding these out of the way as you're sewing. And don't ask me why I know that. All right, so you see I've sewn now on line 2 and line 3. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll take this back over and trim this up together. So what I'm going to want to do now is make sure I just kind of pull my paper because it's a little bit stuck. So I just kind of pull this out just enough to get my paper out. All right, there we go. Same thing with this one. I'm not trying to take out my stitches, but I do want to get my paper lifted up so I can get back to my fold. And I'm going to do that on this side as well. All right, now I've got this exposed. So that's where you can see where it needs to be cut now. So again, we had already cut the blue square, but you see this is all extra that we don't need. We'll go ahead and get that out of the way. Now that I've got that trimmed, I am going to go get this pressed really good. So you can see here it is, nicely pressed, trimmed, and we're ready to go ahead and do the identical thing now with these remaining 2 triangles. So again, I'm going to just go ahead and turn this over and put the dots of glue on this side. Same thing on this side. Now, if you prefer to do one side at a time, you can. That way you don't have to try to keep up with keeping the triangles out of your way. But it's whatever you prefer. Okay, we are ready to go ahead now and take this back to the sewing machine to sew down numbers 4 and number 5. I begin to sew number 4. Again, I'm just going to make sure this other triangle is not getting sewn underneath it. And again, I'm going to sew kind of off the paper a little bit. Just sewing right on that line. It's pretty simple. Flipping it around now. Again, I'm going to make sure the triangle flaps are out of my way. And get this pressed. Then we're going to be ready to cut it. All right, so this is the pressed side. So we're ready to go ahead and cut this down. Now, I like to cut it actually with this ruler. And if you notice, I'm just cutting on these cut lines around the square. Cut as carefully as I can though, because that is going to be the unfinished size of my square in a square. And look at that. All right, so we'll go ahead and just tear this paper off now, which comes off so easy. And we've got a square and a square. We're going to do this identical step now to go ahead and make the ones that go in the 4 corners. So the one we just made was the 2-inch size. And now we're going to go ahead and make the 2.5-inch size. So to do that, again, I've got my piece of paper, my square for the center, and 2 squares. And the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and cut this on the diagonal. Next thing I'm going to do, just like before, I'm going to go ahead and fold my paper. I'm actually starting to have fun with foundation paper, and if you've been watching me as I've been just starting to use this, I was a little bit mixed at first, and now I kind of like it. I guess it's like anything, you just have to get a little more comfortable with it, a little bit of practice with it, and then you get into it. Okay, so first thing I'll do is a little dot of glue to go ahead and put my square, again, centered as best I can get it. It's large enough so it's really not too much of a problem because you're going to trim it down anyway. Okay, I've got it pretty good, and I'm ready to go ahead and cut this down. And this is where the add a quarter, hence the name, adding a quarter right there. And you can see right through it, and so you can see just what to cut. And I'm going to go ahead and do that on all 4 sides. Next step, remember from before, there's our number 2 and number 3. So we'll start there. And I just put my dots of glue where I'm going to put my triangles on those 2 sides. And again, these are larger. We're going to do a lot of trimming on this, but that's okay. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to be sewing 2 and 3. Remember, I'm going to start sewing here and go all the way till basically the edge of this paper. Still have my stitch length is 1.8. Again, I'm coming off the edge here first. All right, now we're going to do the same thing to number 3. All right, I'm going to take this and get this pressed really good, and then we'll get it trimmed. All right, so this is after pressing, and so we're ready to go ahead and trim this down. So if I look at my number 4, again, I want to first kind of tear my paper away because I want to be able to get back to my fold line. Don't want to tear it, but I need to expose that. Okay, I'm going to do this on both sides. Okay, so let me go ahead and get this trimmed. Again, I'm using that 1/4 inch and seeing through it so I can see just what I need to trim. Same thing to this side. All right. The next thing we're going to do is add our glue for our last 2 sides. Right. Time to take this to the machine and get the last 2 sides sewn. Then I'm starting off the edge of the cut line. Again, I'm just kind of making sure this triangle's out of my way. All right, I'm going to take this and get this pressed really good, and then we'll take a look and trim it down together. All right, so this is my pressed square and a square before trimming. And now I'm going to go ahead and just cut it. Okay, there is our square and a square, the larger one. We only need 4 of these. Let's go ahead and tear away this paper. All right, and there is our square in a square. So I now have all the squares that I need for the 4 corners, as well as the 16 that I'm gonna need for my sashing pieces. Next week, we'll plan to take all of our blocks, both the star block and our baskets, our 16 square in a square for the sashings, 4 square in a square for the inner border corners. And again, I have all of the cuts that I had made for my sashing pieces, as well as the cuts I needed for my inner border, and I've got my outer border. So next week, we're going to take all of this, put it on the design board, and get this quilt put together. Now next week, in addition to laying out our Bountiful basket blocks and getting this sewn together, we're going to go ahead and look a little bit more closely at our Christmas project that we'll be doing. And I shared this with you last week. For those that missed it, I'm so excited. We're going to be making the Winter Birds quilt from Tilda. I'm using her Merry Little Christmas fabric. This is one of the patterns that she had available for free on her website. She has it made up in her Merry Little Christmas collection. I'll pop it up here so you can see it again. She actually demonstrates it in a couple different colorways. She also even has pillows and stockings. There's so many things you could make, and it's all made using basically the same block. So we'll be looking a little bit more closely at the cuts that we need to make. I will be starching my fabric for sure with this pattern. So next week we'll spend some time just going through this pattern, tips on cutting, and looking at this a little bit more closely. And this is definitely the project that we'll be focusing on over the next several weeks. If you don't have the Merry Little Christmas bundle, you really can achieve a similar look, likely just turning to your stash. So I shared this last week, but I did just spend a few minutes thinking, if I wasn't using this, would I have something on hand to kind of come up with a similar look? And the answer is absolutely I did. This is fabrics that I found, and this was not even in my Christmas fabrics. This is just in my stash. So I highly recommend shop your stash. So if you plan to sew along with us on this project, I would recommend going on ahead and deciding on the fabrics that you plan to use. Go ahead and start pulling those, selecting the ones you want. And if you haven't already, be sure to download the free pattern. I will include the link in the description to, again, this pattern, but also really to Tilda's website. A lot of her patterns are free. So I did want to show this is what I will be using. I decided to go with the red colorway as opposed to more of that teal green color, which I do love, but I did decide to go more with the red. Now this is not part of the Merry Little Christmas collection. However, it is a Tilda fabric. I was able to get it on sale. I already had some, I just needed a little more of it. So this is what I'm using, again, from one of her previous collections. And I'm also using some eyelet fabric from Fig Tree. That's what I'll be using as well for my light background. So this is going to be my colorway, and then this, and then if I need to pull, I've got all of this right here ready to go. So I do encourage you, go ahead and gather your things, and we'll definitely be looking a little closer at this next week. Before we close today, I'm going to go ahead and clear this off so we can take a closer look at the pumpkin picking pattern. So here is the pumpkin picking pattern, and I've just put it right on the table, but I did it long ways so we could just see it a little bit more closely. So you can just see I really just truly did swirls all over. This is all free motion, so every swirl is a little bit different. I find these so fast and easy to do. So as far as the back, I always try to buy backs when I can get them on a decent sale. This is actually one by Lori Holt, and I am a sucker for words. And I fell in love with this one. It's all fall words. So this project definitely turned out to be one of those extras that we threw in, and sometimes those turn out to be the most fun and the most treasured quilts. I hope you've enjoyed making the pumpkin picking or following along with me as we've made this pumpkin picking pattern. It definitely is probably going to be my favorite for this season, but I don't know. I do really love the Bountiful Baskets as well, so we'll have to see what that one looks like. That one is coming together nicely as well. So we'll go ahead and close out for now. But I hope you all have a great week. I hope you have a little bit of time to quilt as you're getting ready for the Thanksgiving holiday. And until next week, happy quilting.